Hi, thank you everyone for attending this event. It's been a long day, and a few more panels after this as well. It's been a long summer for the Ambassador Corps, right? There's the NATO summit in Washington, RNC last month, and now the DNC. And a lot's been happening. Even since the RNC a month ago, Ukraine invaded Russia, which is a major change in that war. Right? It changes the game, puts Ukraine from on a defensive footing to more an offensive footing. Ambassador Prikk, if I can start with you, since you share a border with Russia, this war is happening in your backyard, right? You've lived under Soviet occupation. How does the Ukrainian incursion into Russia change the game? Moving from Ukraine on their back foot to the front foot and forcing Putin to react to this on his own turf.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. There certainly are very many layers, many aspects to it. There's different political or the military, operational, tactical aspects to it. But I would not stop there for a long time. I think politically it changes the kind of narrative of where the war is right now, and what's possible and what's not possible. After all, there have been so many telling us that this war is fundamentally stuck. There is no strategic good outcome, and thus there should be some kind of unholy, ugly compromise to be made. I think now Ukraine has thoroughly proved that actually there is enough space for dynamism in this particular conflict. After all, when Vladimir Putin started to gain his power, he kind of offered the deal to Russian people that you lay low on politics, you don't intervene, so to say, into politics. You let it to be run by people who actually know. And in return, we'll give you prosperity, security, and respect in the world. Now, this second part of this equation has completely collapsed, and this Kursk invasion is showcasing it in a way that nothing else has done before.
And how should the West react? Right? I know there's obviously weapons flowing into Ukraine continuously. Do Western governments and NATO need to step up and increase supplies to Ukraine, put more pressure on Putin? What is the best course of action here to support Ukrainians in creating this new front in Russia?
Whether we should continue supporting them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have to. After all, what Putin is trying to convince us is give us doses of fear and fake hope. He's trying to convince us that he has the upper hand, that he will, no matter what, he will get what he wants. We have to prove him fundamentally wrong, because this war is not about some random villages on the eastern front of Ukraine. This war is about way more, even way more than Ukraine. This is about the rules of the game, certainly in the transatlantic space, but I would argue actually globally. So we have to keep supporting them.
And Ambassador Pierce, there's been a lot of talk about kind of taking the gloves off, right? Allowing Ukrainians to use British weapons like the Storm Shadow, US ATACMS, inside Russia. Is it time to do that? How would you characterize the discussions about letting the Ukrainians do this? President Zelensky spoke yesterday and again called for ATACMS and Storm Shadows and things like that to be used inside Russia. Is that on the table?
After the NATO summit, there was a story to the effect that Britain had changed its rules and allowed Ukraine to make freer use of the weapons we supply, including inside Russia. But that story was mistaken. There hasn't been a change in British policy. Targeting is something for the Ukrainians, but we also have a say in certain targets for certain weapons. I do think it's interesting. I completely agree with my Estonian colleague. Do you think it's interesting turning the tables on Putin? Obviously, there's a difference of scale, but this is exactly what Putin hates. There's that saying about Russia, push the rapier in until they meet cold steel. Well, here's a bit of cold steel, and it's very welcome.
And to push the rapier in further, is the UK prepared to let the Ukrainians use the weapons that you give them as they see fit inside Russia?
I think that's something we keep under review. And to be honest, the whole supply of weapons to Ukraine is kept under review because as the battlefield conditions change, their needs change also. This is why we have the Ramstein process that Lloyd Austin, Secretary Austin, set up. It's so NATO allies, other partners can calibrate the weapons they can supply to what Ukraine needs on the battlefield. So it's a constant review.
And Ambassador Hillman, the Canadian government recently said that the Ukrainians can use what they want, the weapons the Canadians supply inside Russia as they see fit. What does that mean for your government? Is that a change in policy? And are there limits to that?
Yeah. So Canada actually has never put conditions on the weapons that we've been providing to Ukraine during the conflict. We have always provided them and been of the view that it's really for Ukrainians to make their best assessment as to how to use those weapons. That's our position. It's always been our position. It's going to continue to be. And I just to comment on recent developments, I think that for us also maintaining a sense of solidarity with the Ukrainian people who have been fighting so hard for so long against all odds, and frankly in a way that I think nobody really expected, is very central to our philosophy around supporting Ukraine. And I think now more than ever, as they have made unprecedented moves, we want to make sure that they understand that we're there for them, we're listening to what they think they need, and are ready to respond.
Okay. And Ambassador Pierce, a bit of a political question. You're literally next door neighbors with Kamala Harris, right? The Naval Observatory and your ambassador's house. You ever pop over for tea? Does she stop over for tea? Have you guys talked? What are your views on her foreign policy?
They are very nice neighbors, it has to be said. They very kindly invited my husband and me to their 50 years of hip-hop party. I am very sorry to say we were totally out of place, but we had a great time. She did a great speech about the power of music, and it was one of those really nice Washington events where you get a huge crowd of diverse people all coming together, and we were very pleased to be included. We've seen the second gentleman quite a few times. When the Vice President moved in, the New Zealand ambassador and I went over with welcome gifts. Okay. So we've been really honored to be that close.
And has she given you any ideas about her foreign or domestic policy while you're
not over
chatting
those
over the fence?
moments. It's quite hard to talk about foreign policy during hip-hop. It doesn't kind of lend itself to that discussion.
It depends what kind of hip-hop you're listening to, I suppose, right?
Maybe.
And looking at a potential Harris administration, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of things written about people kind of trying to game out where her foreign policy is, right? What her views are. Ambassador Prikk, what would you like to see from a Harris administration as far as war in Ukraine, NATO, and keeping up with what the Biden administration has been doing with strengthening NATO? And do you expect continuity there?
Yeah. We certainly do expect a great deal of continuity there, and certainly the first element that I would like to emphasize here as something that would be desirable is the predictability when it comes to new administration, that we get clearer signals and clear understanding of their views, including the issues that they want to keep the way that they are, and some changes too. Secondly, whatever the next administration is, we absolutely do think, or we are of a very strong view, that the North American allies and European allies share fundamental, vital interests. And these interests are not only certainly not primarily not only military, but it's more political, economic issues. So we expect any new administration to realize and act upon it that these regions are of core national interest for the U.S. When it comes to NATO policies, we certainly expect to move ahead with issues that we have decided to do in order to further adopt our defense and deterrence posture, so that it's really fit to the current threat picture, and that we have resources to match there. And certainly, when it comes to Ukraine, the message has to be that the Western alliance, that has the GDP of 50 times the GDP of Russia, basically. That we have the principles, we do have the staying power to support these principles, and we will not desert our friends and allies.
And Ambassador Hillman, first off, quickly, are there any Canadian hip-hop artists that you'd like to recommend to the potential Harris administration?
Well, I mean, there is quite a famous beef that happened over the summer that I don't want to get into because it's a cross-border, sore point for us. Have talked to Leader Jeffries about it a few times because he's obviously, pays a fair bit of attention to the hip-hop community. So I've had to do a little, like Ambassador Pierce, a little bit of boning up on this. But I turned to my sons and they helped me. Sorry, now I got all excited and forgot your question.
And it was a Chicago-Toronto beef, right? So,
right.
And so looking at a Harris administration, what changes would you like to see, maybe things that the Biden administration you had hoped that they would do, or hoped that they would change if Kamala Harris is elected, as far as NATO support, as far as weapons development, co-development, things like that? Or even Indo-Pacific. I mean, Canada, people forget, is an Indo-Pacific nation, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you like to see there happen under this administration?
Interestingly, I think, and we'll see where a Harris-Walz government will go, administration will go. I do think that the Vice President Harris has had, I think there will be continuity, I absolutely agree, but she has had a different emphasis than President Biden in certain areas and different experiences during her tenure. She's been focused on the hemisphere. We've talked to her a lot about security in the hemisphere. It'll be interesting to see if that's something that she continues to build on when if she is president, because we obviously have a very keen interest in security in our hemisphere. We talked a lot about North American security and homeland security with her over the past few years, Arctic, and what we are doing together in the Arctic and what we're doing for NATO in the Arctic. I expect that to continue. And in that regard, the other thing that I think is interesting about Vice President Harris is she is very focused on tech issues, AI issues, very knowledgeable in that field. And so there's a crossover there, I think, in defense and security and new technologies and maintaining leadership and global sort of governance around some technologies that offer enormous opportunities but also pose important risks, including national security risks. I think that would be another issue that we're looking for. And I think finally, and this is not something that is different, but it's something that I think is essential for us to continue, is partnerships around defense resilience together. And we have made some really important headway with the Biden administration in that area. Our sort of defense production cooperation, most recently with a trilateral agreement with Finland on icebreakers, but also our critical mineral supply chain that we have and making sure that we're using that to the benefit of our allies. I think that the Biden administration has launched that. I think it's vital that we continue that over the long term.
And would you make a pitch for Canada to be part of the AUKUS alliance? I know that's been Canada's wanted in, like New Zealand and Japan as well has made that pitch.
Well, we're keen to talk with our AUKUS friends, and I think we feel optimistic about everything that we can bring to that partnership.
Okay. The three of you were at the RNC last month. just a few weeks ago, and now it's been, I think, it's 2 days here. How is this different? How's the vibe different here than it was in Milwaukee, right? I mean, the Democratic Party's been very energized over the past few weeks by Kamala Harris. Ambassador Pierce, we start with you. What are the big differences here, right? I know there's been some talk. There was some talk at RNC about foreign policy, not a lot. We haven't really hit that yet here. But what have you seen? How does it feel different?
I think you're right. There's a different feel. I think, on the whole, the RNC is more formal. It's more structured, and on the whole, the DNC is more casual. It has a greater range of people. I haven't seen the delegates yet because I only just got here. But it seems to have many more people milling around and taking part in events. And I think that's kind of what you might expect from what you see of their respective constituencies.
Yeah. And Ambassador Prikk, quickly, we only have a little bit of time, but back to Putin and Russia, since that's, again, in your backyard. Is Putin deterrable? And he's been rattling his nuclear saber, right? The Biden administration, according to reports today, is coming out with a new nuclear policy. But how do you deter Putin? How do you convince him to stop? I mean, Ukraine has a couple thousand troops in Russia right now. That's not going to stop him. Russia's a big country. So what do you think is the one thing that the Harris administration could do to really try to knock him down a peg?
Any administration has to be on the message, has to be clear in terms of its objectives, and we have to really use our strength where it's relevant. As far as Putin's war in Ukraine, after all, we are not talking about impossible proposals. We are talking about Russia returning to Russia. That shouldn't be that crazy concept, right?
Yeah.
Russia returning to Russia and restoring the international order as they've been asked by most countries in the world, including as part of the votes in the UN General Assembly.
Yeah.
So every war ends because political leadership decides that it's now time to end it. It's not that the guys in the trenches get bored. And every war ends only if one side decides that the costs are higher than the benefits. We have to deliver the message to Putin, and also in a deterrence wise, also in a wider sense, that to continue with this aggression or to start an aggression against this Western alliance is something that will cost a lot. And every day Putin continues this war, he will lose more. This is the message that he has to get.
If we give a round of applause for ambassadors who ran out of time, I wish I could ask you the same question, but thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this NATO summit. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice to see you.